Okay, we'll start now. Uh, Today we are going to cover uh, 2024 exam paper, first paper of philosophy optional. Part A we covered in the last lecture, that pertains to Indian philosophy. But before I start the Indian philosophy questions and start discussing what can be the model answer for that, let me tell you a few points which makes an answer a good answer, basically. And you can also see when you go through the answers which I am going to discuss and give today, whether they contain those points or not. Now, first and most important point is directive of the question. Uh, See, you have to read the question very carefully, and then accordingly you have to decide your answer. I mean, it should not be that whatever you know about the topic you simply write that, because then you are not going to get good marks. Whatever is asked, that should be written. This is very, very important. Now, second point is, in directive itself it is contained. Basically, suppose there is a word like evaluate, critically evaluate, or examine, then your answer should be 60% exposition and 40% critical evaluation. I mean, in that way, you have to divide. Uh, if suppose simply the word is explain or discuss, then also 25 to 30% evaluation, critical evaluation may be there. Even in those questions where nothing is mentioned, there also, if one or two lines, if you include, which pertain to critical evaluation, uh, that will be upgrading your answer, basically. Now, what will be include in critical evaluation, that is also very, very significant. Now, first thing is views of critics have to be included. Second thing is comparative points with other systems of philosophy, whether Indian or Western, that also needs to be included. And then your reasoned opinion also, because if you have some opinion after about discussion of all those, particularly in 300 words questions, that also can be included. And then finally, a concluding remarks of one or two lines can also be mentioned. So all these things will become basically part of critical evaluation. Now, another important thing is language, because a few of the answer sheets I have seen of some of the students, practice tests they have given. See, the grammar has to be very, very correct. The language, which if you are writing in English, it has to be correct grammatically. If you are writing in Hindi or any other language, that also has to be correct. So please see that is there. And legibility is very, very important, because I mean, it should be easily readable, whatever you are writing, because examiner is not going to put much stress on himself for reading your answer. The next is adherence of word limits, because if it is 150 word question, 10% minus plus, that is okay. But then beyond that, you are going to, I mean, your marks are going to be deducted. So with, I mean, whatever number of words, 300 words, 150 words, 225 words, 10 percent this way, that way is okay. Otherwise, you are going to. Another very important point is referencing of the various critics, various philosophers, various thinkers, various their books, etc. All those things also should be mentioned, because unless that is done, your answer will not be good. Then another and last point which I will like to say is, whatever important words and phrases you are using, because in philosophical or even uh, I keep on telling again and again, for each chapter, for each topic, you should have important words and phrases which you should understand also, and you should use also in your answering. So whatever important words or phrases are there, and whatever names you are using, whether it is of the various thinkers, philosophers, critics, or their books and their writings, etc., that should be underlined properly. Because if that is not done, then even if you write, examiner may not take pain to study or read whatever you have written. So that should be underlined properly, so that easily it's identifiable in any answer. So if these points please follow in writing answers. Now we'll come and discuss the Indian philosophy part. We will take up as far as the uh, last year's exam paper is concerned. So now let us see what were the questions and what can be the ideal or model answer for that. Now, as you know, Indian philosophy part is in the part B of the uh, exam paper, and the questions are from fifth question to eighth question. Fifth question is compulsory. It has five parts, 150 words each, 10 marks each. Sixth, seventh, eighth questions each have three parts. Out of that, I mean, depending in part A what you have selected, one or two questions you can take from these three questions. Now here we will be discussing all the four questions of part B, which were there in last year's exam paper. So we'll let us start without any wasting further time. See, fifth question, part A reads, do you think Charvak philosophy is positivistic in nature? Give reasons and justification for your answer. Now, this is the uh, question, and this has to be replied in 150 words. Now, already I have told you 7, 8 points, important points just before start of this. That what will be the characteristics of a good answer. Now, let us examine that whether all those points are included in this answer and subsequent answers as well. Uh, First directive, let us see, do you think Charvak's philosophy is positivistic in nature? So first you have to straightway reply yes or no, or if not, you cannot reply yes or no, you have to explain something, you explain that. And then subsequently you have to give reasons and justifications for your answer. But as I told here also, at least one or two or three sentences we have to include for critical evaluation for the Charvak philosophy, just to uh, upgrade the answer, because unless you do that, your depth of knowledge of philosophy will not be understood by the examiner, and you may not get very good marks. So now let us see that. So first is yes, Charvak's philosophy reflects a proto-positivistic stance. Like logical positivists, Charvak accepts perception, that is pratyaksh, as the only valid means of knowledge. Another point which I didn't mention in my just initial remarks. See, for Indian philosophy or for Western philosophy, original Sanskrit words for Indian philosophy and Greek and Latin words for Western philosophy, you should use definitely, if you remember, because that will again upgrade your answer. So here also same thing has been done. Charvak accepts perception, pratyaksha, as the only valid means of knowledge, and reject inference, that is Anuman, and testimony, that is Shabd, unless empirically verifiable. Now, this anticipates the verification principle central to A.J. Iyer, Rudolf Carnap, and Vienna Circle. So, this is basically how Charvak is anticipating positivist philosophy or logical positivist. This is mentioned here. Charvak's empirical skepticism, that is denial of soul, God, karma, and afterlife, mirrors positivism, dismissal of unverifiable metaphysics. So, this is also to some extent similar to logical positivism. Its radical materialism resonates with Democritus, atomism, and the scientific naturalism underlying modern empiricism. However, so till here, I mean, these two paragraphs, how it's similar to logical positivism and positivism in general, that's what we are mentioning now. We'll see next. Now we are trying to bring some critical view also. However, critics like Richard Popkin and BK Matilal argue that Charvak's blanket rejection of inference is excessively rigid, excluding valid inductive reasoning, foundational to science, something logical positivists accept. So here it's a difference with positivism. So broadly it resembles, but there are some differences also. Thus, so now in conclusion we are saying the same thing. Thus, while lacking formal analytic rigor, Charvak embodies an early anti-metaphysical and empirical tradition, foreshadowing positivist tendencies within the framework of ancient Indian materialism. So now this completes our 150 word answer, because 150 word you will not give much scope to write, elaborate, and other things. So this word. Now we'll come to next part, Explain the six reasons offered by the Nyayiks to prove the existence of self. So this is very, very direct question. You have to tell the six reasons which have been offered by Nyayiks. Now answer. The Nyayiks, particularly Gautam, Vatsayan and Udayan, assert that the self, that is Atma, is a real, enduring, conscious substance distinct from the body and senses. They offer six key reasons. So this is the reasons. Now first is desire, that is Iksha. Second is aversion, that is Dvesa, and effort, that is Prayatna. Third is Jnana. Fourth is pleasure and pain, that is Sukha and Dukkha, recognition, then Pratyabhigyana, then memory, that is Smriti. So these are the six things, and then we will conclude. Thus, the Nyaya school, especially the Udayans, Atma Tattva Viveka. So this is book of Udayan, establishes the self as a permanent, unitary, conscious substance, countering Buddhist Anattavad and Charvak materialism. So see, even though we have not got much scope of writing the comparative analysis or criticism, briefly we have mentioned, and even sometimes even passing references of these also are going to upgrade the answer. So, and the books, etc., references, philosophers, all those things have been mentioned. So even in direct questions also, there is a scope for upgrading the answer, because here also, even though number of words are very small, 150 words, still Buddhist Anattavada, Charvak materialism has been mentioned very intelligently in the last line, which, and if you underline it properly, because here whatever needs to be underlined, I have made it bold. So that you can underline, and it's going to fetch good marks. Okay, now we'll come to next. Do these sentences, that is, air does not have heat and air is not fire, refer to the same type of absence or abhava according to Vaisesics? You know, Vaisesics have given a separate category called abhav. So here the question belongs to that part only. So now answer is no, because see, let us now again see the directive. Do these two sentences, air does not have heat and air is not fire, refer to the same type of absence or abhava according to Vaisesics? Discuss. Now directive here is discuss. So discuss also means we can discuss in and around that whole concept a number of things. So that's what we are going to do now. No, I mean, first thing, direct question is do. So we are saying no. According to Vaisesics, particularly Kannad and Prasasthapada, the sentences air does not have heat and air is not fire reflect the same category of absence but differ in applications. So this is Anyanya Bhava, that is mutual absence, but differ in application. That's what is the concept of abhava, I mean, which has been applied here. Air does not have heat expresses mutual absence between an attribute and a substance, where heat inherently associated with fire is absent in air. Second is, in contrast, air is not fire, conveys mutual absence between two substances, affirming that air and fire are ontologically distinct. Both represent ananya bhava, defined as the non-existence of one entity in the locus of another, applied to different relational contexts. Now, this precise differentiation, now see the last paragraph, this is very important. This precise differentiation exemplifies the Vaisesic school's commitment to ontological rigor, later systematized further by Prasastpada and eventually adopted by Nyaya, where absence is recognized as a valid, knowable category in their metaphysical framework. So now this, I mean, this is a very minor difference is there, you see, in two sentences, but that also has been very clearly brought out in this answer. Now, what is the D part? Now, let us see. How does Bhatt's view of nature of word meaning and centennial meaning differ from Prabhakar's view, critically discussed? Now, here it's critically discussed. So now we have to first explain in about 60% words, and then 40% we have to explain. I mean, we have to critically evaluate the whole exposition. So now, I mean, Bhatt and Prabhakar both are different schools of Mimamsa, as you know, if you have already studied that. So now let us see that. The Bhatt and Prabhakar schools of Mimamsa, led by Kumaril Bhatt and Prabhakar Mishra, differ fundamentally in their views on word meaning and sentential meaning. The Bhatts advocate Abhihitan Vyayavad, where words first convey independent meanings and sentence meaning arises through synthetic composition. For example, in Bring the White Cow, Svetam Govam Anay, white cow and bring denotes separately before combining. The Prabhakaras uphold Anvita Vidhanvada, where words inherently convey meanings as related within this sentence. Here, white directly means whiteness qualified by cowhood, not standalone whiteness. So, basically, word meaning and sentence meaning by both Prabhakar and Kumaril Bhatt. Here, differentiations have been. So, first paragraph is general, then second is Kumaril Bhatt's view, and then Prabhakar's Mimamsa view. Critically, now, because as you know, I mean, we have to critically discuss. So, now let us now in this paragraph we will critically, but Watt's view struggles with context sensitivity, as isolated meanings often remain incomplete unless composition. Prabhakar's holistic view bypasses this but is critiqued for assuming inherent relationality without explaining how it arises cognitively. So basically, in criticism, both Watt's view and Prabhakar's view has been criticized in a way that what are the negative points have been brought out in very brief, because in 150 words definitely you don't have much scope of writing all those things. So here in very brief the critical evaluation part has been taken up. Now let us, and then in the last paragraph, if you see, modern parallels include Wittgenstein's contextualism reflecting Prabhakar's, and Fritz and Montague's compositional semantics echoing Bhatt. Both aim to preserve Vedic sentence integrity. So this makes this whole critical evaluation complete, including this comparative views also from Western philosophy also integrated in this answer. Now let us see last portion of this first question, I mean fifth question. In Visishtadvait philosophy, in the relationship between God and the world is parallel to that between an individual self and its body. Critically discuss. Now here also critically discuss is there. So again critical evaluation has to be taken in a, I mean, at least two paragraphs we have to write in evaluation and conclusion and critical evaluation. So in answer is, in Visishtadvait propounded by Ramanuja, the relationship between Brahma and word is explained through sarira sariri bhav, that is body soul relation. Just as the self pervades, sustains and controls its body while remaining distinct, Brahma pervades and governs chit, that is soul, and achit, that is matter, as his body. The word and selves are inseparable, dependent modes, that is prakaras of Brahma, real, substantive, yet lacking independent existence. Now, this preserves qualified non-dualism, balancing unity and plurality. So now these two paragraphs, they basically explain the whole thing. That is exposition. Now, what is the critical view? Now, let us see. Critically, Madhav argues it blurs the finite-infinite divide. So this is Madhavacharya's view. Then while Advait contains, it compromises Brahm's Nirgun nature. So Advait Vedant, Shankar's Advait Vedant has another kind of criticism. Now defenders means supporters of Ramanuja or Vishradvait, they clarify that the relation is ontological, not spatial. Brahma remains transcendent yet immanent. So this is on the one hand criticism, and their defense also has been mentioned. So criticism also, if positive and negative points both are there, it should be balanced one. It cannot be one-sided. So that also you have to keep in mind. Thus, the analogy is admired for reconciling oneness with diversity, yet debated for whether it fully safeguards Brahm's absolute transcendence. So this concluding remarks concludes the whole thing that is mentioned there. So if you okay, now we'll go to next question, that is sixth question. Now, as you know, fifth question is basically 150 words each. part A to part E. Now, sixth question has three parts. Sixth, seventh, eighth, all the three questions have three parts. A part is of 20 marks, so it has to be explained in about 300 words. So here you have to, you have the scope of writing. Good number of words, and you can explain the things also in detail. Like that, B and C part are 15 marks, about 225 words each we have to mention. So now let us go to sixth question. Differentiate between the Charvak's refutation of self as a transcendental category and the Buddhist rejection of Atma. So basically, you have to differentiate between the two. And differentiation also here will include critical points pertaining to both. So now let us see the answer. Both Charvak and Buddhism reject the concept of a permanent, unchanging Atma, central to Nyaya, Sankhya, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. Because these systems, Nyaya, Sankhya, and Mimamsa, Vedanta, believe that there is a permanent self, and these Charvak and Buddhism, they oppose that. Now, yet their grounds and frameworks differ fundamentally. So even though they oppose the uh, concept of a permanent unchanging self, but still it's not that the same. They are fundamentally different also. Now, Charvak attributed to Brihaspati and developed by Jayarasi Bhatt. This is his book, Tattva Lava Simha, reject any non-physical entity. Only perceptible material elements, that is earth, water, fire, air, exist. Consciousness is viewed as an emergent property of matter, like intoxication from fermented grains. This view stems from strict ontological materialism and an epistemology limited to direct perception. So, Charvak ontologically, they believe that nothing which is not perceptible exists, and similarly in epistemology they believe only in perception, discarding inference beyond sensory data. Now, so this is what Charvak believes as far as Atma is concerned. Now, let us see what Buddhism believes. In contrast, Buddhism articulated in Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyama Karika and Buddha Ghosh Visuddhimagga denies, see, these are their books and these are the Buddhist philosophers, denies self through anatta, that is anatman, that is anattavad, anatmavad, denies self through anatta rather than reducing mind to matter. It analyzes existence into five aggregates, that is panchaskandhas. The self is negated through impermanence, that is anitya, dependent origination, that is pratyut samutpad. All these are important philosophies, are important doctrines in Buddhism. If you have already read in Buddhism, you will be able to understand. If you have not read, please read it, and then if you read this answer, you will be able to very clearly understand. Dependent origination, that is pratyut samutpad, and emptiness, that is sunyata, asserting that all phenomena lack inherent essence. So all these are Buddhist doctrines, and basically this is the explanation of Buddhist Anatmavad or Anattavad. Epistemologically, Charvak relies solely on empiricism, rejecting metaphysical constructs. Buddhism, while empirically grounded, employs inferential reasoning within dependent origination. So Buddhism, to some extent, they also uh, rely on inference within the concept of pratyut samutpad, that is dependent origination. Now, critics. Now we have to also understand. Both these views have been criticized, and let us now understand that. Critics like Richard King and Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay argue that Charvak's crude reductionism fails to explain memory, intentionality, or subjective continuity. Conversely, scholars like Mark Sidretz note that Buddhism, though phenomenologically sophisticated, faces the karmic dilemma how rebirth and moral accountability function without a persisting self. So, this is basically, if you see the criticism of both philosophical systems. Charvak on the one hand, because Charvak is anyway very crude reductionism, if you understand, that kind of system. Buddhism, yes, philosophically little sophisticated, but still they also have problem of rebirth and karma and uh, uh, moral accountability. In essence, Charvak's Daniel is material reductive, collapsing mind into matter, while Buddhism is ontological deconstructive. So these are important philosophical words. You can understand and you can remember, you can note down, and you can use also whenever required in practice tests or actual exam. Dissolving self into transient, interdependent processes reflecting deep divergences in ontology, epistemology, and philosophical depth. So basically, in last paragraph, what is said is both Charvak and Buddhism, even though they reject permanent self, but their ontology, their epistemology, and philosophical depth is totally different. So that's what has been mentioned here. Now let us go to part B of the sixth question. How do the two schools of Buddhism arrive at two opposed conclusions? Namely, everything is void and everything is real from the same doctrine of Pratyut Samutpad, answer with arguments. Now, this is basically regarding Buddhism, two schools we have to explain. Now, doctrine of Pratyut Samutpad, that is dependent origination, asserts that phenomena arises conditionally, lacking independent existence. Yet it leads to divergent conclusions in Madhyamik and Yogacara Buddhism. So these are the two important schools of Buddhism, and their conclusions as far as from Pratyut Samutpad are little different. So let us understand that. So first we will understand Madhyamik and then we will go to Yogacara Buddhism. Madhyamik schools founded by Nagarjuna, that is Mool Madhyama Karika, and elaborated by Chandrakirti, that is Madhyama Kavatara, holds that dependent origination directly implies Sunyata. Since all entities arise dependently, none possess Swabhav, that is inherent existence. Hence, everything is void. Nagarjuna equates Pratyut Samutpad with Sunyata. So this is Nagarjuna's view, employing dialectical negation, that is prasanga, to dismantle all ontological assertions. So this is basically Madhyamika view, mainly of Nagarjuna's view of Pratyut Samutpad uh, uh, as far as Buddhism is concerned. Now we'll go to Yogachara. Conversely, the Yogachara school led by Asanga, Vasubandhu, these are books, Vimsatika, Trimsika, and further systematized by Sthirmati, interprets Pratyut Samutpad as governing the causal flow of Vijnana, that is consciousness. External objects are seen as mental projections, that is Vigyapti Matra, but the stream of consciousness is functionally real. Hence, everything is real, refers to eminent continuity of mind. So, now you have seen now both. Yogacara on the one hand says that it's real, and on the other hand, Madhyamik school says that it's a Sunni. It's a zero. Everything is Sunni. Now, critically, now we'll have to critically examine also. Critically, Madhyamik's radical emptiness is often challenged, for instance, by Sankara's Advaita Vedanta. So, one of the very, very severe critic for verging on epistemic nihilism. Conversely, Yogachara's idealism. So, this is Yogachara idealism, faces critiques from later Madhyamika like Santideva, who argue it subtly reifies consciousness. Nevertheless, both remain faithful to Pratyut Samutpad's intent, negating intrinsic existence while preserving causal interdependence. See, divergence. So now we are explaining why this divergence arises between the two. The divergence arises from emphasis. Madhyamika negates ontological claims altogether, while Yogacara affirms the phenomenological reality of consciousness. So now here very subtle difference between the two, but the conclusion or results are very, very different. So this is what has been explained, and very intelligent question has been asked also. So this you will be able to understand once you study the Buddhism chapter at least 2-3 times very, very calmly and very intensely. You will definitely understand. Now we will go to C part of the question 6. What is the distinction between Bhava Bandha and Dravya Bandha according to Jaina? Discuss. So now this is the question. This is from the concept of liberation from Jainism. So now let us see, with about 225 words we have to answer this question. In Jaina philosophy, as articulated in Uma Swati's Tat Tattvarth Sutra and Nemi Chandra's Dravya Samagraha. Bandha, that is bondage, signifies the binding of karmic matter, that is karm pudgala, to jiva, that is soul, perpetuating samsara, that is cycle of rebirth. Now this operates at two interlinked levels, bhavabandh and dravyabandh. So basically this bondage itself operates at two levels, bhavabandh and dravyabandh. So in first paragraph, I mean, it has been a very intelligently, uh, after giving a little introduction, it has been explained how this bondage is divided in two parts, bhavabandh and dravyabandh. Now let us see what are the two. Bhavabandh is a psychological bondage arising from internal dispositions like mithyatva, that is false belief, raga, dvesa, and pramada. So now English words are also given. Now you can see it reflects the volitional and ethical condition of the soul, which generates asrava, that is karmic influx, through kasayas, that is passions, and yoga, that is mental, verbal, and physical activities. So now this is in brief what is meant by bhavabandh. Now what is dravyabandh? Dravyabandh by contrast is material bondage. Now this is a psychological bondage and this is a material bondage, where karma, that is pudgala, karma pudgalas, that is subtle karmic particles, physically adhere to the soul as consequence of bhavabandha. Here bhavabandha is the efficient cause and dravyabandha is the material manifestation of that cause. So now you can understand these are the two. Now let us critically and try to understand what are the critical evaluation of these. Critically, while Jainism's dual mode of bondage uniquely connects ethical psychology with ontological materialism, it faces metaphysical challenges. Now, Shankar's Advaita Vedanta dismisses the possibility of material karma, binding and attributeless self, while Buddhist phenomenology denies any enduring self to serve as a substrate. So basically, Buddhism and Shankar both are severe critic of Jainism, this bondage and liberation concept. Now, in conclusion, nevertheless, the precise distinction between Bhavabandha as internal volition cause and Dravyabandha as a external karmic effect remains a distinctive contribution of Jaina epistemology and ethics. So now this is the basically Bhavabandha and Dravyabandha differentiation along with critical view also and good conclusion also. Now we'll go to seventh question. Now seventh question also, as you know, has three parts. Now part A, as you know, has to be answered in about 300 words, 20 marks question. So now the question is, present an account of evaluation of Prakriti as propounded in Samkarika. In this context, also explain the difference between Buddhi, Mahat, and Ahankara. Now, one more thing I just want to tell you, if a question has more than one parts, then all parts have to be dealt properly, appropriately. Because if you leave any part and just start or not put equal emphasis on other part, you may not get, because here you see there are two parts, clear two parts of the question. One is present an account of evaluation of Prakriti as propounded in Samkarika, and second is also explain the difference between Buddhi, Mahat, and Ahankara. So unless you deal both the parts, adequately, you are not going to. You cannot say that you have attempted the 20 marks question. If you attempt only one part, it will be 10 marks question only. So 10 marks you are leaving. So this is very important, because examiners will be very keenly seeing this, whether both the parts have been attempted carefully or not. Another thing I just want to tell you, all the students who are seeing this video, usually in philosophy, small paragraphs, answering in small paragraphs and one paragraph linked with other, a very logical progression. These kinds of answers are considered good. Because sometimes you tend to write in 1, 2, 3 or enumerating or mathematical way or bullet points. Please don't attempt. If you can write in paragraph wise, nicely small paragraphs, one after the other. All these in a very logical progression, it will be linked. So that kind of answer will be, unless very clearly question itself says enumerate, or let us say uh, a question itself, directive has been given to give the bullet points or numbering or all those things, then only you attempt like that. Otherwise, you have to be in a very, very smooth manner, writing small paragraphs and trying to explain or logically from introduction to conclusion, logically completing the idea. So now let us see, I mean, these two parts, how it has been taken up here. Now, the Sankarika of Ishwar Krishna. Sankarika is a book that also you should know, because in question Sankarika is mentioned, but the writer, who is writer, has not been mentioned. So here, the Sankarika of Ishwar Krishna, drawing upon Kapila's doctrine, presents a systematic account of evolution of Prakriti, the primordial, unconscious, and eternal substratum of reality, composed of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Prakriti remains in equilibrium until disturbed by mere proximity of Purusa, that is pure consciousness, initiating evaluation without active causality. So now in first paragraph, if you see, I mean, what is Prakriti's description, what is composition, and what is mentioned in Sankarika has been clearly mentioned. Now we'll take up further. Account of evaluation has to be given. So now let us see. The first evaluate is Mahat, also called Buddhi, the principle of cosmic intelligence and determinacy, enabling discernment, judgment, and order. When reflected at the individual level, Mahat functions as a Buddhi, governing personal intellect, rationality, and discrimination. From Buddhi arises Ahankara. Now, in the whole process, if you see, differentiation is also in a way being given, because in the question, if you see, differentiate between Buddhi, Mahat, and Ahankara. So the first, if you see the second paragraph, it not only describes the evaluation, but also it describes the difference between these three components. The first evaluate is Mahat, that is also called Buddhi, the principle of cosmic intelligence and determinacy, enabling discernment, judgment, and order. When reflected at the individual level, Mahat functions as a Buddhi, governing personal intellect, rationality, and discrimination. From Buddhi arises Ahankara, that is the ego principle, which introduces self reference, the sense of I, and ownership. Ahankara further diversifies based on gunic predominance. Gunic predominance means sattva, rajas, tamak. I mean, that is, those are three gunas. So, gunic predominance, sattvic Ahankara produces manas, the five cognitive senses and five motor organs. Rajas Ahankara acts as the dynamic catalyst for activity. Tamas Ahankara produces the five subtle elements, that is tanmatras, which evolve into five gross elements, that is mahabhutas. Conceptually, Mahat and Buddhi are functionally identical. So now the first part here, first part is over. So we have already described the evaluates, and we are now going to differentiate between Mahat, Buddhi, and, as you see in the question itself, Buddhi, Mahat, and Ahankara. So that, as I told, both parts have to be adequately dealt. So even though in previous paragraphs also that has been described in a way, but then now in next paragraph it has been a little more elaborated basically. So conceptually, Mahat and Buddhi are functionally identical but differ in scale. Mahat refers to universal intelligence, as noted by Vachaspati Mishra, whereas Buddhi operates within the individual as the seat of discernment. In contrast, Ahankara emphasized by Gaurapada, marks the emergence of subjectivity, transforming objective cognition into possessiveness, identity, and ego. So basically, here in this paragraph, further elaboration and differentiation between the three have been very, very clearly mentioned. So now let us go. Sankhya's evolution model is praised for its non-theistic rational cosmology. So this is a positive point as far as Sankhya's evolution model is concerned. Now in this paragraph, we are trying to critically evaluate and we are trying to conclude it properly. Yet criticized by thinkers like Shankara, that is Advaita Shankara, for the unexplained mechanism of how Purusha's proximity activates Prakriti's. Despite this, so, I mean, there is criticism on the one hand, particularly from Advaita Vedanta Sankara, that how Purusha's proximity activates Prakriti. Despite this, its nuanced differentiation of Mahat, Buddhi, and Ahamkara remains a landmark in the Indian philosophical psychology. Now, you see, in this question, even though it's basically critical evaluation has not been specifically asked for, because if you see, First part is you have to present account of evolution. Second part is differentiate. But still here, very briefly, passing remark has been made. So that's what I want to say. Even if it has not been asked, if you are able to mention in one line or one sentence or give the passing remark of this, you are going to upgrade the answer, because examiner will understand that you have read the whole philosophy very, very intensively, and you have understood the things very well. So this is what I just want to clarify. Now we'll go to part B. So long as there are changes and modifications in chitta, the self is reflected therein, and in the absence of discriminative knowledge, identifies itself with them. Now present an appraisal of yoga soteriology in the light of above statement. So yoga soteriology, as you know, the path to liberation. So basically, from bondage to liberation, this is a study of soteriology. So this statement we have to analyze in the light of yoga soteriology. And the statement, I will read it again. So long as there are changes and modifications in chitta, the self is reflected therein, and in the absence of discriminative knowledge, identifies itself with them. Now let us go to the answer. Now this has to be answered in about 225 words. And this you have to present an appraisal. So definitely some part of critical view you have to definitely mention, because appraisal means you have to evaluate critically also. So now let us go. The statement encapsulates the core of Patanjali's Yoga Soteriology, as elaborated in the Yoga Sutra with commentaries by Vyasa, that Yoga Bhasya, and Vachaspati Mishra, that is Tattva Vaisaradi. The Purusa, that is pure consciousness, inherently free and luminous, becomes falsely entangled with the modifications, that is vritti of the chitta, mind step, through the mechanism of Pratibimbavad, that is reflection theory. Purusha mistakenly identifies with mental fluctuation. So now this part basically explains how uh, how in yoga soteriology, uh, I mean this whole vritti chitta vritti nirodh, because now it will come next also. So how the self and modifications in chitta are related with each other. Now this misidentification arises from avidya, that is ignorance, the failure to distinguish Purusha from Prakriti without Vivekhyati, that is discriminative knowledge. Purusha assumes the attributes of Chitta, that is pleasure, pain, and attachments, leading to bondage, samsara. Now, soteriological liberation, that is Kaivalya, is achieved through Chitta Vritti Nirodh. That's what I was telling. That is culmination or culminating in Nirbija Samadhi, where Vivek Khyati permanently severs Purusha's misidentification with Prakriti. Now, critically, Yoga Soteriology, rooted in Sankhya dualism, that is Ishwar Krishna Sankhkarika. Now, this is main, you can say, book of the Sankhya system, is challenged for its rigid ontological dualism. Now, this is a main criticism, because the Purusha and Prakriti are totally different. Critics argue that if Purusha is always pure and unrelated, the very possibility of false identification becomes metaphysically problematic. So, moreover, unlike Advaita Vedanta's non-dual moksha, uh, yoga's liberation as isolation is seen by some as a negative, focusing more on withdrawal than on spiritual plenitude or relational unity. So basically, this paragraph is in a way criticism of the yoga soteriological philosophy. However, in conclusion, if we see, nevertheless, its psychological precision in diagnosing bondage through mental misidentification remains a profound contribution to Indian soteriology. Now we'll go to C part of the seventh question. Our yoga is a double movement of ascent and descent. Discuss the above statement in the context of Sri Aurobindo's conception of integral yoga. So now here we have to discuss this sentence in light of Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga. Now let us see. The statement that is our yoga is double movement of ascent and descent encapsulates Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga as articulated in his seminal work, The Life Divine, and The Synthesis of Yoga. These are the two books of Sri Aurobindo. Now, this yoga seeks not mere liberation, but the divinization of life itself. So this is again very important. The ascent involves the soul's progressive movement from lower planes, that is uh, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya, towards the higher realms of Vigyan Maya, supermind. So basically, one by one, it progresses up to supermind, and ultimately the Sachidanand, that is existence, consciousness, bliss. So it finally concludes in Sachidanand. Now, this ascent transcends the ego, ignorance, and fragmentation of lower consciousness, culminating the realization of the transcend divine. Now, this is ascent part we have explained. Now, what is descent part? Equally essential is the descent of the supramental consciousness, bringing divine light and force into the mental, vital, and physical planes. Now, this descent is not symbolic, but a literal transformation of matter into conscious divinity, forming the basis for Arbindo's concept of supramental evaluation. So now these are two parts. On the one hand, ascent is there, and the other descent is there. Now we will have to critically examine this also. Critically, Arvindo diverges from Sankara's Advaita Vedanta, which seeks moksha through world negation, and from Buddhism's nirvana, which aspires to cessation. His vision affirms the integration of spirit and matter, culminating in life divine, where liberation is not escape but the spiritual evaluation and cosmos. Thus, integral yoga harmonizes ascent toward the transcendental with the descent for imminent transformation, making spiritual realization both an individual and collective evolutionary destiny. So now this is critical criticism part, and now this is concluding comments as far as Arvindo's integral yoga is concerned. Now we'll go to last question, part A. This we have to write in about 300 words. Now let us see what is the question. How do I know that I know? Answer this question with reference to Naiyayiks, the Bhatt, Mimansaks, and Prabhakara. So basically, here you have to tell validity of knowledge from three perspectives: Naiyayiks, Bhatt, Mimansaks, and Prabhakaras. So now let us see how. The question, how do I know that I know, addresses the epistemological issue of pramanya, that is validity of knowledge. Whether knowledge is self-certifying or requires external validation. Now, this is basically the concept of whether it is Swatah Pramanyavad or Partha Pramanyavad. So now we'll come to that. Now let us see. The Naiyayiks following Gautama, that is Nyaya Sutra, and elaborated by Vachaspati Mishra and Udayan, advocate Partha Pramanyavad, that is extrinsic validity. Knowledge is known to be valid through a subsequent cognition. So this is the Naiyayiks view. A second order mental act that apprehends both the object and the original condition, cognition, certifying its validity. Without this, one cannot claim to know that one knows. Now, what Mimamsak says, so this is Naiyayiks. What Mimamsak led by Kumaril Bhatt says, also uphold Partha Pramanyavad, just like Naiyayiks, but reject the need for reflexive cognition. For them, validity depends on external conditions such as abadhit, abadhitva, and arth kriya, that is pragmatic efficiency. Cognition is assumed valid until falsified. So there is minor difference, even though both believe in Naiyayiks and Kumaril Bhatt believe in Partha Pramanyavad, but still both little different. I mean, that's what has been explained here. Now, what Prabhakar says, the Prabhakar Mimamsa following Prabhakar's Mishra asserts Swatah Pramanyavad. That is intrinsic validity of knowledge. Knowledge is self-revealing. It simultaneously illuminates the object, the cognition itself, and its own validity. No second-order cognition or external corroboration is required. So now this is the Prabhakar's view of knowledge regarding Swatah Pramanyavad. Now critically, now we'll critically try to evaluate this. Critically, the Nyaya and Bhatt frameworks, though effective in explaining error correction, invite the classical problem of epistemic regress, noted by Sali Kanta Mishra. If knowing requires a second cognition, does that itself require a third? So there will be infinite regress in that. So that's what has been mentioned here. Conversely, the Prabhakar view sidesteps regress elegantly but faces the unresolved challenge of explaining how fallibility coexists with intrinsic validity. So again, this is again a problem. So both have some negative points that has been mentioned. Now this debate, now in concluding, we are seeing this debate crystallizes a fundamental epistemological divide. Whether the assurance of knowing arises through immediate phenomenological self-disclosure or through reflective inferential mechanism, a question that sits at the very heart of Indian theories of knowledge. And most of the schools are divided, and there are two groups, as you have seen here. And if you further study Indian philosophy, you will know, understand other schools also who supports which theory of validity. Now we'll go to part B of this question. A candidate who is never seen to be studying during the daytime secures high position in competitive exam. How would the Bhatt Vimansaks and Nayaks explain the success of this candidate? Discuss. So now uh, this again in the epistemology only. We have to explain. See, the Bhatt Vimansaks following Kumaril Bhatt and elaborated by Parsarthi Mishra explain the candidate's success through Arthapatti. So this is one means of knowing, basically. So means of knowledge. Arthapatri is one of the pramanas given by Kumaril Bhatt. An independent pramana. The observation that candidate is never seen studying during the day contradicts the causal expectation that effort leads to success. To resolve this cognitive tension, one postulates that the candidate must be studying at night or in unobserved circumstances. So arthapatti arises when coexisting facts appear inexplicable without assuming an unperceived fact. So this is arthapatti. Now in contrast, Nyayiks following Gautam, Nyaya Sutra and elaborated by Vachaspati Mishra, Udayan and Jayant Bhatt reject arthapatti as a distinct pramana. They treat it as a form of inference. So these Nyayiks basically infer and they reject Arthapatti as an independent pramana. The reasoning given is given the candidate's success despite the absence of daytime study, one infers study occurring at unseen times based on an universal causal relation, that is Vyapti, study leads to success. So they infer through inference, or they know through inference, and these guys, that is Bhatt Mimamsaks, know through Arthapatti. Critically, the Bhatts argue that Arthapatti is sui generis, emerging from the possibility of known facts coexisting without postulation, independent of formal inferential structure. The Nyayiks counter that such postulations inherently rely on unstated inferences grounding in causal regularity. Now, this debate underscores a foundational tension in Indian epistemology regarding whether explanatory postulation continues a unique pramana or is reducible to structured inference. Now we'll go to C part of this question. On what grounds do Prabhakaras and Nayayiks reject memory as a source of knowledge? Discuss. Both the Prabhakaras and Nayayiks reject memory, that is Smriti, as a valid Praman source of knowledge, but on distinct grounds. The Nayayiks, following Gautam and elaborated by Vachaspati Mishra and Udayan, argue that Pramana must yield novel and truth-revealing cognition. Memory merely reproduces prior valid cognition. It does not generate new knowledge. It depends on residual impressions, that is sanskara, and is classified as pramana nu pravishta, a dependent cognition rather than an independent pramana. So this is view of Nayayiks. Now let us see what are the view of Prabhakaras as far as memory is concerned. The Prabhakar Mimamsas following Prabhakar Mishra and further refined by Salikant Mishra reject memory on the ground that it lacks presentational immediacy. Pramana for them requires direct immediate apprehension of the object. Memory mediated by past impressions fails this criterion. So both Prabhakar as well as Nayayiks, they deny memory as valid source of pramana. Now critically, both models face limitations. Now what are the limitations? Let us see. Nyaya's focus on novelty as questioned even by Jayant, but uh, overlooks cases where recalled knowledge has fresh epistemic significance. Similarly, Prabhakar's exclusion of non-immediate cognition struggles to justify epistemic reliability in testimony, history, and learning. So, modern epistemologists argue that both systems adopt an overly narrow presentationalist framework, understanding how retrieved knowledge often functions epistemically akin to fresh perception. So, I mean, basically, their views are not in line with modern thinking of epistemologists also. So, this is what has been mentioned, and this is a critical evaluation of both the views. Thus, while both models exhibit internal coherence, their dismissal of memory highlights a broader tension in Indian epistemology between strict immediacy based knowledge models and extended inferential cognition. So, now this completes the uh, part B of or section B of the paper 1 of 2024. Next week, what we are going to do is we will take up the second paper and we'll try to discuss various questions and try to see how best we can answer that. So maybe we will take up one part, that is section A, maybe socio-political philosophy, and next week we'll take philosophy of religion. So that will complete both the papers, paper 1 and paper 2 of 2024. Now these videos I am making just to, I mean, students should understand what will be the consequence of good answers. I mean, and this is real exam questions. Therefore, I mean, they can understand the things much better. So that is the purpose of these videos. So hope I succeed in that purpose, and hope it's very useful to the students who are preparing for the exam. Now, thank you for watching this video. We'll again meet next week. Thank you. Thank you.